Friends, at this time we are going to begin the funeral services for Irene G. Landau. If you have a cell phone or a pager, I would ask for you to please take a moment to turn it off or place it in the silent mode. And we welcome those of you joining us online through Zoom. And at this time we'll begin the funeral services that will be officiated by Rabbi Tzvi Landau.
Glad you could all come. It's not a happy occasion, of course, but I'm glad to see every person I can here today. As we're gathered here to honor Julie and Michael's mother, Mary and Noah's grandmother, my mother-in-law, it is, of course, the month of Nisan. It's even Passover tonight. So in that tradition, I have a lot of things I could say. I had the privilege of knowing Irene for more than 20 years. But in that tradition of not eulogizing, okay, I won't say too much. I'll say some appropriate prayers. I'll make some relevant comments some comments here and there, but not an extensive eulogy. I'll just say some prayers, so you know what's coming. Then I'll let Julie come. She has some words she'd like to share with us to help us know your mom, your grandmother. She will share those words in Kaddish, and then whoever can come with us to the cemetery, of course, is most invited. We did privately, Bruchta and all the appropriate things, those appropriate things we did privately. And I'd like to start with some verses from the 15th Psalm, which are highly appropriate for Irene. Mizmor David, Adonai, mi yagur bo'alecha, mi yishkon b'har kodshecha. Who shall abide in your tent? Who shall dwell in your holy mountain? He who walks up, I'm going to say, although, of course, the original is written in the masculine, because, of course, remembering Irene, I will allow myself, in the translation, to use the feminine. So who abides in your tent? She who walks uprightly. I think those close to Irene will find this appropriate. She who walks uprightly and does what is right and speaks truth in her heart. She who does not slander with her tongue, nor does evil to her neighbor, nor takes up a reproach against her neighbor. She who does not put out her money at interest, nor takes a bribe against the innocent. She who does these things shall never be moved. We all go to the next world, but her memory and her thoughts and her presence is with us forever. And some other highly appropriate words from Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, Lamed Aleph, chapter 31. Eshet Chayil, mi yimsa, a worthy woman, who can find? Her price is far above rubies. She stretches out her hand to the poor. Again, these are selected verses which are, again, extraordinarily appropriate. Extraordinarily appropriate. She stretches out her hand to the poor. She reaches forth her hands to the needy. Lo tira leveita mishaleg. She's not afraid of the snow for her household. Good thing, living in the Chicago area. Ki kol beita lavush shanim. All her household are clothed with scarlet. Her husband is known in the gates. Indeed, those of you who are also privileged to know Melvin, her late husband, knows how strong he was, and it's not surprising, considering how he had this very strong woman by his side. Strength and dignity are her clothing. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Does that ring true? Does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Many daughters have done virtuously, but you excel them all. And one last thought before I invite Julie up to say her words. From the book of Eo, from Job, Kafchet, chapter 28. We were talking before about Irene as a woman of wisdom, and I certainly thought of her when I came across these words. Surely there is a mine for silver and a place for gold where they refine it. Iron is taken from the earth, copper is smelted from the ore. But where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Man does not know its price. There's no price in wisdom. Man does not know its price, nor is it found in the land of the living. Gold and glass cannot equal it, nor can it be exchanged for jewels of fine gold. Wisdom is truly priceless. Truly, may I invite you to say your words. We were told this is the place because then those of us are glad we could join us streaming will be able to hear and see us if you come here.
I'd like to say a few words about my mom. Irene Sylvia Goldblatt was born on August 23, 1928, on the west side of Chicago. Her parents, my Grandma Betty and my Grandpa Nat, were divorced when my mom was relatively young. And Grandpa Nat remarried and moved away, and although the connection wasn't broken, my mom grew up with the identity of the daughter of a single mother. Because her nuclear family was so small, her extended family was very important to her. Her Aunt Belle and Uncle Harry were warm and welcoming people. They lived down the street, and they often had gatherings in their home. And my mom's cousins, Buddy and Ronnie, were like the brothers that she never had. My mom was an excellent student. She went on to complete a master's degree at the University of Chicago in psychology. During her years at the University of Chicago, she told me that she developed a fondness for sitting in coffee shops and discussing intellectual topics until late at night. When she was in her early 30s, she met my dad, Melvin Landau. My mom told me that on one of their first dates, he made a barbecue for her on the balcony of his Hyde Park apartment, and that actually almost became a much larger fire. But fortunately, she overcame that experience, and they went on to get married, and together they moved to the south side of Chicago. I was born 2 years later, and my brother Michael 2.5 years after that. Until I was about 7, my mom worked at an institute for psychological testing and treatment of children. She wasn't completely satisfied with her job, and she decided to return to the University of Chicago to complete her PhD. My mom's home office was in a small room in the attic of our house in South Shore. You'd go up a narrow staircase, and at the top you'd find a manual typewriter, of course, and piles of paper and enormous boxes of gum. She finished when I was 10 or 11, when we'd already moved to Evanston, and it was a great source of pride for her. It amazes me, now that I have kids, that she accomplished this with 2 young children at home. She got a job teaching psychology at Mundelein College, a Catholic women's college, which later merged with Loyola and became a co-ed institution. Many of the professors were nuns who lived together in a building on campus, and she was fascinated by their lifestyle and admired them very much. She enjoyed teaching a diverse group of students, some of whom were older and could share their life experience when discussing psychological theories. She was very invested in her work there and stayed there until retirement. Once when I was in my 20s, I was in a bookstore that was near the Mundelein campus, and I heard some students discussing the psychology department, and I said, are you taking classes with Dr. Landau? Is she any good? And the student said, oh yes, she's very good, but she's tough. So I went home and I told my mother. She wasn't any too happy that I had done this, but I didn't reveal my identity, so I don't think I did any harm. Though my mom regarded herself as quiet and reserved, she always had close friends, and she also had groups of friends. One of these was her rap group, a group of women who initially met in the 1970s to do consciousness raising and talk about women's issues. So she and several women from the group continued meeting for the next 35 or 40 years, though I got the impression that they went on to talk about other topics as well, though I don't know because the door was always shut tight when the rap group was there. There was also the Chug, a group of families formed by our temple that also continued meeting for about 40 years. Much later, when my mom was living at the Mather, she was part of a group of friends that ate together regularly. Both of my parents loved to travel. During my childhood, we took long train trips, including making a trek to Seattle every other year to see our cousins there that involved 2 nights on the train, as well as trips to California, New York, New Orleans, and other places in the US. Later, my parents became interested in going abroad and went further afield to England, France, Italy, Spain, Turkey, China, and other places. Though my mom was nervous about coming to Israel, she did visit us there. She came to help me get ready for the birth of our firstborn child, Miri. She came to help me get ready, but then while she was on the plane, Miri was born 2 months early. So we spent the time, every day we'd go to the hospital. And I was remembering that the day before her last day there was a terror attack about 3 miles from the hospital. And you could feel that something was going on. I mean, she could sense it. We were hesitant about telling her what, but eventually it came out because my father read the news and called her. So the next day was her last day, and they were still looking for people who might be accomplices of the shooters. And on the way to the hospital, we ran into a roadblock with soldiers, and even I was kind of scared. But this was her last day to see her grandchild, and even though she was nervous about coming to Israel to begin with, she didn't say a word. We kept on driving. She was actually very proud and excited to be a grandmother to both of her grandchildren, and she loved getting news of Miri and Noah. During the 3 years that we lived in Evanston with the kids, from 2008 to 2011, she made a point of coming to school events and watching the kids perform in shows and at theater camp. My mom had a tendency to worry. At points in my life when I didn't live in Chicago, she would send me long letters, and enclosed in the letters often would be newspaper clippings to prove some kind of point. For example, a low-fat diet is the healthiest, or sunburn causes cancer. A friend suggested that I send back clippings making the opposite point. Chocolate is good for you. Sunshine builds up your vitamin D. Even then, I understood that all this worry was because I was loved. I always felt close to my mom. And as I became an adult, I enjoyed talking with her as a friend, sharing news and gossip, and asking her for advice. I appreciated that she was warm and encouraging and had an easy personality. She was always on the lookout for experiences that we might enjoy, for example, a museum that might interest the kids. My mom didn't tell jokes, but she had a quiet sense of humor and was always attuned to the absurdity of a situation. These last years, the years of her dementia, have been challenging. It has been hard to watch a keen intellect fade. It was hard when my mom forgot my birthday, the first time ever, then never remembered it again. It was hard when she stopped responding to Mom, so I had to call her Irene. We have been losing her for a long time. And yet, although she was not the same person, she did have a good quality of life. She enjoyed sitting in the garden and even doing a bit of gardening. She was as active as she could be and enjoyed taking walks, going to concerts, and participating in art activities. She had always enjoyed going out to eat, and this remained a pleasure for her. We are grateful to her care managers, Randy and Nancy, and her caregivers, Crystal, Bim, Toyin, and Temi, for keeping her safe and happy. My mom identified with Jewish culture, but she wasn't observant. When I started to keep kosher, she did her best to accommodate me, though with some frustration. She once said that kashrut is a mishigas, so she complained about Jewish observance, but in Yiddish. Though she was not religious, there is an aspect of Jewish tradition that she might have related to. As I mentioned earlier, my mom was a big traveler. There is a mitzvah to escort a traveler on the beginning of his or her journey for a minimum distance of 4 amot, which is 6 feet, but it can be farther. Similarly, there is a mitzvah to accompany the dead on the way to their place of burial, also for a minimum distance of 4 amot. So I want to thank you all for being here today to accompany my mom, Irene Sylvia Goldblatt Landau, or in Hebrew, Chayat Tzvia Bat Natan, on her final journey. I am sure she would be grateful to have you as traveling companions.
So before we accompany Irene on her final journey, as Julie mentioned, there is the Kaddish, which we have 2 primary mourners today. We're all, right? God included, but primarily Julie and her brother. Julie will say it on her behalf and on Michael's behalf. This classic prayer, the Kaddish, which is not a sad prayer. It's just a prayer reaffirming our connection to God, to each other, and to think about the one that we lost. Yes, but not in a sad, it's not a sad prayer. It's just affirming that connection. And I'd like to invite you, Julie, to say it again on your behalf and on Michael's behalf as we all think about it. And then whoever can come with us to take Irene on her final journey to the cemetery is most welcome. No, it's not the A's. Here we go.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah.
Amen.
V'alma divrach yurtei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayachon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayedecho Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru Amen.
Amen. Yehi
Shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam yomei amayah. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudesha briachu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata damiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehi shlam rava min shamaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.
Amen. Whoever can come with us, whoever can't, whoever can. Johnny, by all means.
Thank you. Friends, this concludes the services here at the chapel. The interment and burial services will continue at Memorial Park Cemetery in Skokie. The approximate travel time to the cemetery from the funeral home is about 5 minutes. For those of you able to join us, please do keep the following safety precautions in mind when traveling in the procession. Please make sure that your bright headlights and your 4-way hazard flashers are on. Please travel as close as safety permits to the car in front of you to avoid any gaps in our procession. We will be providing several of the cars in the procession with a magnetic orange flag to be placed on top of your car, as well as an orange funeral safety sticker for your windshield. For your own safety and security, I would suggest not speaking or texting while driving to the cemetery and the funeral procession. The family has also requested that any memorial contributions in Irene's memory to Over the Rainbow at 2040 Brown Avenue in Evanston and online at otrhousing.org. That information is available in the service folder that you should have received. And for those of you joining us online, that information is also available on our website. At this time, I'll ask everyone to please rise and stand in place. And for those of you who've been asked to serve as pallbearers, if you'll please come forward as we escort the casket and the family from the chapel.